What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walks onto a talk show expecting a friendly chat and instead faces an ambush that spirals into television chaos? It only took one dismissive comment from host Denise Welch to turn what should have been a pleasant interview into one of the most uncomfortable moments in British daytime television history. Eugene Levy arrived at the Loose Women Studios that morning with his trademark warmth and humility. The veteran actor, known for his roles in American Pie and Schitt's Creek, was there to discuss his latest project. He settled into his seat on the panel, surrounded by hosts Denise Welch, Ruth Langsford, Janet Street Porter, and Nadia Sawalha. The studio audience applauded as the camera started rolling. Denise opened the interview with what seemed like a standard question. So Eugene, you've been in the business for decades now. Do you ever feel like you're just playing the same character over and over again? Eugene smiled, politely, used to handling tricky questions with grace. Well, I think every actor brings something of themselves to their roles, but I always try to find something unique in each character I play. Denise leaned back in her chair with a smirk. Right, but let's be honest. The nervous dad, the awkward guy. It's all basically the same thing, isn't it? Ruth Langsford shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The audience fell silent. Eugene's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. I wouldn't say that, Eugene replied carefully. Each role has its own challenges and requires different approaches. Denise waved her hand dismissively. Oh, come on. You're not exactly Daniel Day-Lewis, are you? You show up, do your eyebrow thing, and collect a paycheck. Janet Street Porter's eyes widened. Nadia Sawalha looked down at her notes, clearly uncomfortable with where this was heading. Eugene took a breath. I'm not sure I understand why you're being so hostile. I came here to have a conversation, not to be insulted. Hostile? Denise laughed. I'm just being honest. Isn't that what we do on this show? We tell it like it is. And the truth is, you've been coasting on the same shtick for years. Ruth tried to intervene. Denise, maybe we could talk about Eugene's new project instead. No, I want to hear his answer, Denise insisted, turning back to Eugene. Do you actually think you're a serious actor, or are you just comfortable being a one-trick pony? The studio audience began to murmur. Eugene's face had gone from friendly to visibly upset. His jaw tightened as he processed what was happening. I think you're being incredibly rude, Eugene said firmly. I've worked hard my entire career. I've written, I've directed, I've produced. I don't need to justify my body of work to you or anyone else. Denise rolled her eyes theatrically. Oh, please, don't get all precious on us. You Americans are so sensitive. Can't handle a bit of British honesty? Eugene's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. There's a difference between honesty and rudeness, Denise. What you're doing right now is not honesty. It's an attack. An attack? Denise laughed mockingly. You think this is an attack? I'm just having a conversation. A conversation involves two people exchanging ideas respectfully, Eugene explained, his voice measured. What you're doing is launching unprovoked insults and calling it journalism. Oh, now I'm not a journalist, Denise said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. That's rich coming from someone who's made millions playing the same part over and over. Eugene leaned forward slightly. I've played fathers, yes. I've played comedic roles, yes. But each character has depth, has history, has unique motivations. Just because you can't see that doesn't mean it isn't there. Right, Denise said dismissively. The depth of another bumbling dad character. How groundbreaking. Ruth tried to cut in again. Can we please talk about Eugene's new film? I think our audience would love to hear about it. The audience doesn't want to hear him promote some movie, Denise snapped. They want to hear real talk. And the real talk is that Eugene here has been doing the same thing for 30 years and calling it a career. Eugene took a visible breath, trying to maintain his composure. You know, I've met many interviewers over the years. Some have asked tough questions. Some have challenged me. But all of them, every single one, treated me with basic respect. Until today. Maybe they were just being fake, Denise suggested. Maybe I'm the only one honest enough to say what everyone's thinking. You have no idea what everyone's thinking, Eugene countered. You're projecting your own negativity onto other people. This isn't honesty, Eugene shot back, his voice rising slightly now. This is you trying to provoke me for ratings. And I'm not going to sit here and be your punching bag. Nadia finally spoke up. Eugene, I just want to say that I think you're incredibly talented, and we're grateful you're here. Thank you, Nadia, Eugene said, his voice softening slightly. I appreciate that. But Denise wasn't finished. Oh, here we go. Everyone rallying around the poor wounded celebrity? You know what your problem is, Eugene? You're boring. Your movies are boring. Your characters are boring. And frankly, this interview is boring because you can't take any criticism. Janet Street Porter cut in. Denise, that's out of order. Eugene is our guest. And as our guest, he should be able to handle a real conversation, Denise snapped back. Not just sit here expecting us to kiss his feet and tell him how wonderful he is. Eugene stood up slowly, removing his microphone. The audience gasped. Ruth reached out as if to stop him. Where do you think you're going? Denise asked, her tone mocking. Can't handle the heat? I can handle the heat just fine, Eugene replied calmly, placing the microphone pack on his chair. What I can't handle is disrespect. There's a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately cruel. You've crossed that line multiple times in the last few minutes. Deliberately cruel? Denise repeated, shaking her head. You're so dramatic. I'm just doing my job. Your job is to interview guests, not humiliate them, Eugene said firmly. Denise stood up now, matching his stance. Oh, so now you're humiliated? Because I asked you some real questions instead of lobbing you softballs? You didn't ask me questions, Eugene corrected, his voice steady. You made accusations. You insulted me repeatedly. You dismissed my entire career as if it means nothing. Well, maybe it doesn't mean as much as you think it does, Denise shot back. The audience began to boo. Someone shouted, Leave him alone. Denise gestured dismissively toward the audience. Oh, now everyone's offended. This is exactly what's wrong with modern culture. Everyone's too sensitive. No, Eugene said, his voice carrying across the studio. What's wrong is that you think being cruel is the same as being brave. It's not. It's just cruel. Ruth stood up too, her voice shaking. Eugene, please, let's just take a moment. A moment won't fix this, Ruth, Eugene said gently. This isn't something that can be smoothed over with a pause and a reset. Oh, sit down, Denise said dismissively, waving her hand at Eugene. You're being dramatic, making a big scene. Eugene looked directly at her, his voice steady and calm. No, I can't handle disrespect. There's a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately cruel. You've crossed that line multiple times in the last few minutes. Oh, sit down, Denise said dismissively. You're being dramatic. I'm being dignified, Eugene corrected. Something you clearly know nothing about. The other panelists sat frozen, unsure of how to react. Ruth's face had gone pale. Janet looked furious, but not at Eugene. Nadia's eyes were filling with tears of embarrassment for the situation. You know what? Denise continued, her voice rising. This is exactly what's wrong with Hollywood types. You all think you're so special. You can't handle one person not fawning over you, not kissing your feet. Eugene picked up his microphone from the chair and placed it carefully on the coffee table in front of him. I don't need anyone to fawn over me. I don't need anyone to kiss my feet. What I need is basic human decency, and you're incapable of providing that. Basic human decency? Denise scoffed. I'm being honest with you. That's more than most people will ever give you. You're not being honest, Eugene said, his frustration finally showing. You're being mean. There's a massive difference. Mean? Denise laughed harshly. You want to see mean? Mean would be me really telling you what I think. I think you've made your opinions quite clear, Eugene replied. You think I'm talentless. You think I'm boring. You think my career is worthless. You've said all of that in various ways for the past 10 minutes. And I stand by it, Denise said defiantly. Janet stood up abruptly. Denise, stop. Just stop. This has gone far enough. Stay out of this, Janet, Denise snapped. I can't stay out of it, Janet fired back. We're all part of this show. We're all here. And what you're doing is absolutely wrong. I've done hundreds of interviews in my career. I've been asked challenging questions, tough questions, even uncomfortable questions. But I've never been treated with such contempt for no reason. No reason? Denise laughed bitterly. The reason is that you're not as great as you think you are. I never said I was great, Eugene replied, his voice getting louder now. You're the one who keeps making this personal. I came here to talk about my work. You decided to make it an attack on my character and my career. Ruth tried again to salvage the situation. Eugene, please, let's just take a breath and start over. There's no starting over from this, Eugene said, shaking his head. This has been one of the most unprofessional experiences of my life. Denise stood up now too, pointing at Eugene. Unprofessional? I'm doing my job. My job is to ask questions, to challenge our guests, to make interesting television. Your job is to interview people, not berate them, Eugene countered. There's nothing interesting about being cruel. It's just sad. The audience began to applaud Eugene's words. This seemed to infuriate Denise even more. Oh, brilliant, Denise said sarcastically. Turn the audience against me. Very classy. I'm not turning anyone against you, Eugene said. You're doing that all by yourself. Janet stood up and addressed Eugene directly. Eugene, on behalf of the show, I want to apologize. This is not how we normally conduct interviews. Don't apologize for me, Denise snapped at Janet. I'm not sorry. He's overreacting. Eugene looked at Janet with gratitude. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate that. But I think it's best if I go. Running away, Denise muttered. Typical. Eugene turned to face her one last time. No, I'm walking away. There's a difference. Walking away means recognizing when a situation is toxic and choosing not to participate in it anymore. That's not weakness. That's self-respect. Nadia stood up too. Eugene, I'm so sorry. Please know that we don't all feel this way. I know you don't, Nadia, Eugene said kindly. You've been nothing but lovely. Ruth was now visibly upset, her voice shaking. This has gotten completely out of hand. Eugene, is there anything we can do to make this right? Eugene smiled sadly. At Ruth. You're very sweet, Ruth, but some things can't be fixed with a simple apology. The damage is done. Denise folded her arms across her chest. What damage? You're acting like I physically attacked you. I asked you some questions. That's it. You didn't ask questions, Eugene said, his patience clearly wearing thin. You made accusations. You insulted my intelligence, my talent, and my integrity, all within the first 5 minutes of meeting me. Well, if you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't do interviews, Denise shot back. If you can't conduct yourself professionally, maybe you shouldn't host them, Eugene replied instantly. The audience erupted in applause again. Several people stood up to give Eugene a standing ovation. This only made Denise angrier. Sit down, Denise shouted at the audience. This is my show. Actually, Janet interjected, it's our show. And right now, you're making us all look terrible. Denise whirled on Janet. Stay. Out of this. I can't stay out of it, Janet said firmly. We're all part of this panel, and what you're doing is wrong. Eugene watched the exchange, then spoke quietly. This is exactly why I need to leave. This toxicity isn't just directed at me. It's affecting everyone here. Ruth wiped her eyes. Eugene, I promise you, this isn't normal. We've never had an interview go like this. I believe you, Eugene said gently. But it's happening now, and I won't be part of it. Denise stepped closer to Eugene. Fine, leave, but don't expect to come back on this show ever again. Eugene actually laughed at that. Trust me, that won't be a problem. I have no intention of ever returning. Good, Denise said defiantly. We don't want you back anyway. Speak for yourself, Nadia said quietly but firmly. Denise glared at Nadia. Excuse me? I said speak for yourself, Nadia repeated, louder this time. I would be happy to have Eugene back. He's a talented, kind man who didn't deserve any of this. Oh, so now you're all ganging up on me? Denise asked incredulously. No one's ganging up on you, Ruth said softly. But you need to hear that what happened here today was not okay. Eugene began walking toward the exit. A producer rushed onto the set, looking panicked and confused about what was unfolding in real time. Mr. Levy, where are you going? The producer asked, trying to sound calm but clearly flustered. I'm leaving, Eugene said simply, not breaking his stride. You can figure out how to fill the rest of the segment. But we still have 15 minutes left, the producer said desperately. Then you have 15 minutes to figure out what to do, Eugene replied. Because I'm not staying here. Denise called after him, her voice echoing through the studio. This is so unprofessional, walking off in the middle of a live show. Eugene stopped dead in his tracks. The entire studio fell silent, everyone holding their breath to see what would happen next. He turned around slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. You want to talk about unprofessional? Eugene's voice was measured, but powerful. Unprofessional is ambushing a guest. Unprofessional is making someone feel unwelcome and attacked from the very first question. Unprofessional is refusing to acknowledge when you've gone too far. Unprofessional is turning what should be a pleasant conversation into a hostile interrogation. I didn't go too far, Denise insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. You're just too sensitive, too thin-skinned. No, Eugene said firmly, taking a step back toward the center of the set. You went too far, way too far, and the fact that you can't see that you won't acknowledge it, is perhaps the saddest part of all this. You've lost perspective on what it means to treat people with respect. Janet walked over to Eugene. Let me walk. You out! You don't have to do that, Eugene said. I want to, Janet replied. It's the least I can do. As Eugene and Janet moved toward the exit, the audience erupted in support. People were standing now, applauding loudly. Some were shouting encouragement. You're a class act, Eugene. Don't let her treat you like that. We're on your side. Ruth stood up too, tears now visible in her eyes. Eugene, wait. Please wait. He paused near the edge of the stage, his hand on the railing that separated the set from the exit. Ruth's voice cracked as she spoke, barely keeping her composure. I'm truly sorry. You deserved so much better than this. So much better. This isn't who we are. This isn't what this show is supposed to be. Eugene's expression softened considerably at Ruth's genuine emotion. Thank you, Ruth. That means a lot. I can see that you're upset by this too. I appreciate your kindness. We should have stopped this sooner, Ruth said, wiping her eyes. I should have been stronger. You tried, Eugene said gently. You did try. But some people are determined to create conflict no matter what anyone else does. Denise remained standing in the middle of the set, her arms still crossed defensively. This is ridiculous. You're all being ridiculous, making a mountain out of a molehill. Nadia stood up and faced Denise directly, her voice shaking with emotion. No, Denise, What's ridiculous is that you still don't understand what you did wrong. After everything that's happened, after watching a lovely man be driven off this set, you still don't get it. I didn't do anything wrong, Denise insisted, but her voice lacked the conviction it had earlier. I asked hard questions. That's my job. There's a difference between hard questions and hard cruelty, Nadia said, her voice getting stronger. And today, you chose cruelty. You chose to attack. You chose to belittle. And now you're acting like the victim, when you're the one who caused all of this. The producer was now trying to signal to the crew to cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the unfolding disaster. Eugene reached the edge of the set, standing at the threshold between the brightly lit studio and the darkness of backstage. He turned back one more time, not to Denise, not to the other panelists, but directly to the audience who had supported him throughout this ordeal. "Thank you all for your support," he said to them, his voice carrying genuine gratitude. "Thank you for seeing what was happening here. Thank you for your kindness. I'm sorry you had to witness this. I'm sorry this is how your afternoon has gone. You all deserve better entertainment than watching someone be torn down for no reason." The audience applauded even louder, many of them calling out words of encouragement and support to Eugene. "We love you, Eugene. You're amazing. You handled that with such grace, such dignity. Come back when she's not here. We'd love to see you again. Don't let her get to you. You're wonderful." Eugene smiled warmly at them, waving with both hands. "You're all very kind indeed. And I hope the rest of your day is much better than this last half hour has been." Someone in the audience shouted, "You made our day better just by being here." Eugene placed a hand over his heart, clearly touched. "That's very sweet. Thank you." He looked one last time at the set, at Ruth, who was still crying, at Nadia, who was glaring at Denise, at Janet, who stood beside him, ready to escort him out, and finally at Denise, who stood alone in the center, looking smaller somehow than she had at the start of the show. Then, with a final wave to the audience, Eugene disappeared through the exit with Janet by his side, leaving behind a studio full of shocked crew members, upset panelists, and an audience that had just witnessed something they would never forget. Back on the set, Denise stood alone in the center, while Ruth and Nadia remained standing several feet away from her. The three women who were left looked at each other across the divide that had formed. The studio lights felt harsh. The silence was deafening. Ruth was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe that just happened. I genuinely cannot believe what I just witnessed." "Neither can I," Nadia added, still staring at Denise. "In all my years on this show, I have never, ever seen anything like that." Denise shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her defensive posture beginning to crack ever so slightly. "It wasn't that bad. Everyone's overreacting." "Denise," Ruth said carefully, taking a small step toward her. "It was that bad. It was really, really bad. One of our guests just walked off the set. That has never happened before. Never." "Well, maybe he overreacted," Denise tried again, but her voice lacked any real conviction now. The fight seemed to be draining out of her. "No," Nadia said firmly, taking her own step forward. "He didn't overreact. If anything, he showed remarkable restraint. He was being attacked, Denise. You were attacking him. From the very first question." "I was just being honest," Denise said weakly. "You keep saying that," Ruth said, her voice breaking again. "But honesty doesn't require cruelty. You can be truthful without being hurtful. You can ask difficult questions without being hostile." "He was being oversensitive," Denise tried one more time, but even she didn't seem to believe it anymore. "No," Nadia said, her voice getting louder. "He was being human. He has feelings. He has dignity. And you trampled all over both. You made him feel unwelcome. You made him feel attacked. And when he stood up for himself, you doubled down instead of backing off." The producer rushed over to them. We need to go to commercial. Now. What are we supposed to do when we come back? Ruth asked. Our guest is gone. We'll figure something out, the producer said, looking stressed. Just go to commercial. Denise finally sat down, and for the first time since the interview started, she looked uncertain. Ruth sat down too, but kept her distance from Denise. Nadia did the same. The three of them sat in uncomfortable silence as the producer counted down to the commercial break. And we're out, the producer called. The moment the camera stopped rolling, chaos erupted. Crew members rushed onto the set. The producer began shouting instructions. Other producers appeared from backstage, all looking furious. Ruth turned to Denise. What were you thinking? I was trying to make good television, Denise said defensively. By attacking our guest? Nadia asked incredulously. How is that good television? It's real. It's honest, Denise tried to explain. It's mean, Ruth said flatly. There's nothing. Honest about being unnecessarily cruel to someone. A senior producer approached the panel. What on earth happened out there? All three women began talking at once, but the producer held up a hand. One at a time. Ruth took a breath. Denise started attacking Eugene from the very first question. It escalated quickly, and he decided to leave. The producer turned to Denise. Is that accurate? Denise hesitated. I was asking challenging questions. Challenging questions don't make guests walk off the set, the producer said coldly. Backstage, Eugene was sitting in a chair while Janet stood nearby, offering him water. I'm so sorry, Janet said again. That was absolutely horrific. Eugene took a sip of water. It's not your fault, Janet. You tried to intervene. I should have done more, Janet said. I should have shut it down immediately. You did what you could, Eugene assured her. Denise was determined to make this ugly. A production assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Levy, we have a car ready to take you whenever you'd like. Thank you, Eugene said, standing up. I think I'd like to go now. Janet hugged him. Again, I'm so sorry. You're a wonderful person and an incredible talent. Please don't judge all of British television by this experience. Eugene smiled warmly. I won't. And thank you for being kind. As Eugene left the building, he could still hear raised voices coming from the studio. He didn't look back. Back on the set, the atmosphere was tense as they prepared to return from commercial. The producer had made a decision. Denise, you're sitting out the rest of the show. What? Denise looked shocked. You can't do that. I can and I am, the producer said firmly. Ruth and Nadia will handle the rest of the broadcast. This is outrageous, Denise protested. What's outrageous is what you did to our guest, the producer replied. Now please leave the set. Denise stood up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She walked off the set without another word. Ruth and Nadia looked at each other, both clearly shaken by everything that had transpired. What do we say when we come back? Nadia asked quietly. The producer thought for a moment. You acknowledge what happened. You apologize on behalf of the show, and you move on to the next segment. Ruth nodded. Okay, we can do that. 10 seconds, someone called out. Ruth and Nadia adjusted themselves in their seats, trying to compose themselves after the chaos. 5, 4, 3, 2. The cameras came back on. Ruth spoke first, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Welcome back to Loose Women. As you just witnessed, our interview with Eugene Levy ended unexpectedly. On behalf of the show, I want to apologize to Eugene and to all of you watching. That was not the kind of interview we strive to conduct. Nadia added, Eugene Levy is a consummate professional and a gentleman. He handled a difficult situation with grace and dignity. We wish him all the best. The audience applauded in agreement. Ruth continued, Now, let's move on to our next topic. But even as they tried to continue with the show, the energy had completely changed. The lightness and fun that usually characterized loose women had been replaced by an awkward tension that lingered for the rest of the broadcast. In the green room, Denise sat alone, scrolling through her phone. Already, clips of the interview were starting to appear online. The comments were overwhelmingly in support of Eugene and critical of her behavior. She put her phone down and stared at the wall, beginning to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. Meanwhile, Eugene was in the car, heading back to his hotel. His phone was buzzing with messages from his team, but he ignored them for now. He looked out the window at the London streets passing by, still processing the surreal experience he'd just endured. He had handled countless interviews over his decades-long career. He had dealt with tough questions, awkward moments, and even the occasional difficult host. But nothing had prepared him for the level of hostility he'd encountered today. What bothered him most wasn't the personal attacks on his acting. He was secure enough in his career to not be shaken by one person's opinion. What bothered him was the deliberate cruelty of it all. The seeming pleasure Denise had taken in trying to make him uncomfortable. The complete lack of professionalism and basic human decency. But he had stood up for himself. He had recognized when a situation was toxic and had removed himself from it. He had maintained his dignity and composure even when being provoked. And judging by the audience's reaction, people had noticed and appreciated that. Back at the studio, the show finally ended. Ruth and Nadia immediately left the set, avoiding any interaction with Denise. The producers were already in emergency meetings, trying to figure out how to handle the fallout from what had just aired live on national television. One thing was certain: this would not be forgotten quickly. The interview that was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance had instead become a masterclass in how not to treat a guest. And Eugene Levy, through no fault of his own, had found himself at the center of one of the most uncomfortable moments in British daytime television history. The incident would spark conversations about the treatment of guests on talk shows, about the difference between tough journalism and gratuitous cruelty, and about the importance of basic respect and professionalism in broadcasting. But for Eugene, sitting in that car, driving through London, all he felt was relief. Relief that he had stood up for himself. Relief that he had walked away with his dignity intact. And relief that the ordeal was finally over.